Welcome to 20 Minute Tabletop, a podcast about board, card, and miniature games. And this week we're going to head to the Wastelands to play some Gaslands, a game of post-apocalyptic vehicular mayhem.
Having written off 3 cars myself, Kev, in a 4-week period by hitting deer, I'm not sure if I'm willing to be taken into post-apocalyptic vehicle mayhem, as it were. But yeah, go on, sell me on Gaslands. This is a game you really enjoy, and I've only played once, so I don't have the depth of knowledge you do about it.
Well, listeners, before I get into it, will be questioning the fact that you've managed to write 3 cars off with deer, but you picked me up from the airport once and took me to your house, and sure enough, a deer leapt in front of the car and nearly wrote it off. So it's absolutely true. Unbelievable.
I wonder if this is one of the expansions you can get for Gaslands. So, deer aside, Kev, talk to me about this game. Why is it worth playing?
So interestingly, it's a miniatures game, but it's not a miniatures game where you can buy any miniatures. You actually create your own Mad Max style vehicles by just buying toy cars, or in my case, stealing them from the kids' toy chest, and modifying them, spray painting them, sticking bits of cocktail sticks to them. And we'll talk about the hobby aspect of it shortly. And once you've made your own miniatures, you can play from the rule set, which is given in the hardback, the beautiful hardback rule book. And that's pretty much all you need. You'll need some movement templates, which you can make yourself by just cutting them out. Companies like me, Tabletop Upgrades, also make them and offer them online. And that's something we're going to talk about again later on in the episode, because Mike Hutchinson's got a really interesting distribution model for accessories, a Friends of Gaslands program. So it feels like a really inclusive and almost open source game that's really accessible to all kinds of people. So I suppose we'd best start off by talking about the story of it. And to give you a flavour, the timeline is on the very first page of the rulebook. And it goes from 1969, when the first moon landing happened, 1976, the first manned Mars landing, 1979, Martian installation, and then there's a civil war and the Martian succession in 1991, before in 1999, Mars attacks, Earth collapses, and then a post-apocalyptic TV show called Gaslands is launched. So in this world, the internet's gone, but television continues under the global control of the network, a nest of greedy and traitorous Martian collaborators. The network's executive producer and chief anchorman, David Logan, is responsible for a lineup of ultra-violent blood sports and gas-guzzling death games. The jewel in the network's crown is Gaslands, broadcasting amateur and professional death races from across the world as teams battle for a place in primetime international final.
Well, it sounds to me, Kev, if they put as much effort into game design as they have with the theme there, it's certainly going to be a game to enjoy. I mean, is any of that relevant? Because I can't remember Martians being involved at all when I was playing the game, or is that pure flavour for the game?
No, it is pure flavour, and it's the idea of an alternative universe where there's Earth humans and there's Mars humans. Basically, the people on Mars are like an elite, and the people on Earth are just in an apocalyptic wasteland. And they're kind of scrapping it out for the hope that they will one day get to Mars and live the charmed life. But in the meantime, there's basically prisoners and psychopaths dueling it out on wasteland Earth, crashing cars into each other. A bit like the 90s computer game Carmageddon, if you ever played that one.
I did, yeah.
If you haven't played Carmageddon, then another good cultural touch point is Mad Max. That is the exact kind of theme that this game channels. So like I said, it's really unusual in that you can't just buy miniatures for the game. You've got to make them yourself. And it starts off with, I think it's 1:72 scale, or as the rest of the world knows it, just Matchbox or Hot Wheels cars. And of course, you can just put them on the tabletop and play as is, but where's the fun in that? There's a whole hobby aspect of taking these cars and then kind of griming them up and adding all kinds of extras on them to make them look really thematic. And I know in your game, your friend, was it Neil, actually made some really beautiful looking components and cars.
Yeah, credit where credit's due. In fact, all 3 of my gaming companions put a lot of effort into their cars, whereas I really didn't.
Well, shout out to Queeve, who I played recently at Gaslands. He has converted, it must be 10, 15 cars and has done an absolutely brilliant game. And he inspired me to get started on converting my own. And I've actually got those underway now, finally. So have you made one yourself, Tom?
No, it's one of those things where I just can see imminent disappointment arising after the amount of effort and time that I'd put into something that would almost certainly fail.
Well, I'm going to try and sell you on the concept by just describing the process, and hopefully this will inspire a few listeners to have a go as well. Basically, the idea is you can take a car and you're just going to make it look grimy like something out of Mad Max. And typically, there's all kinds of different ways of doing it. And if you search on Instagram, there's creators who are making the most incredible machines from these little Hot Wheel cars. But generally, the process is you take the car, uh, most people will drill the rivets out of the bottom so that they can separate the top from the bottom. You can get this like very fine mesh called Eva mesh, stick that into the windows, kind of looks like barbed wire over the windows or some kind of industrial netting, and then glue the wheels in place with a hot glue gun so the cars aren't kind of rolling around on the tabletop. And typically you'll play on a 3 foot or 4 foot mat, although you can really play on kind of a kill team size mat, which I think is 22 by 30 inches. You don't need a lot of space. It all depends on how many cars you have. And it also doesn't need a lot of terrain, actually. But we'll come on to the game setup shortly. So once you've glued the wheels in place, you put the thing back together. You'll then go about the really interesting bit, which is creating your post-apocalyptic theme. So generally, cocktail sticks are a great place to start. They make great spikes. Glue them on. You don't have to be neat or skilled in any way. You can just whack them on with some hot glue or some super glue, because any excess glue just looks like weld spatter and really adds to the theme of, Mad Max style creations in the wasteland. Additional things, I mean, people will glue on all kinds of different guns and rocket launchers and 3D printed bits, and there's a whole 3D printing scene around this. You can look on all the usual 3D printable spaces that we talked about in the 3D printed episode, such as Yegi and Cults 3D and Thingiverse. You can even create them yourself if you've got a 3D printer. But if not, you can buy them on Etsy or eBay. There's loads of creators that are selling that kind of thing. But what a lot of people will do, especially miniatures gamers who've got a bits box, as it's known, all of the random bits of the sprues that they didn't use when they're creating a kit, such as like Warhammer 40k players in particular. The miniatures are given with a huge array of weapons and stuff that you never end up using. They get clipped off and put in the fabled bits box. You can modify all those extra bits of chainswords and laser guns and flamethrowers and things, snip them off, glue them on, and then by the time you've primed the model, it looks pretty much like a professional item, and then you can go about griming it up. There's a few ways you can do that. You don't need expensive stuff, just cheap acrylics that you can even get from somewhere like The Works or a Hobby Barn, I think they've got in the US, the most generic of generic craft stores. You don't need expensive like Vallejo air and things like that. Although airbrushes, for those who have them, are useful. And then there's a few little techniques you can use. Texture paints such as rust and grime. You can also just dab on different colors. So using a kitchen sponge to dab on some dirty browns and blacks will make the thing look kind of grimy and like it's been ragged around a field bashing into other cars. And you can take this thing as far as you want, really. Again, on Instagram, there's the most amazing creations. But the fact that you can take something from a charity shop, spend maybe 15 to 20 minutes on it and have something really impressive is, well, I don't know of a miniatures games that's more accessible than that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking I don't have a bits box, but I've got a couple of kitchen drawers that are full of junk that I could probably repurpose for the aim.
Yeah, absolutely. Even random household, like bits of charger cable that would have gone in the bin, you can strip them out and it looks like barbed wire once you've painted it up. It's a really unique aspect that I've never seen in any other miniatures game, really.
Yeah, I could repurpose bits of deer for my written off cars. Get the odd antler.
Yeah, that is absolutely terrifying, Tom. So once you've got the models, you can get started with the game, really. Like I said, you don't have to go through all that hobby, and you can just literally use a car from the charity shop or the kids' toy box. But you need a game space, something like, 3 foot or a 4 foot mat. It's really common. If you play any miniatures games, you'll have that. If not, bit of tape on the kitchen table, you've got a playing space. As for terrain, unlike something like Infinity, the miniatures game, or Malifaux, which requires quite dense terrain, and the more thematic, the better, you don't really need a lot, to be quite honest with you. Just a few obstacles, boxes, maybe even salt and pepper pots if you wanted to channel the idea of the 1990s Micro Machines racing game from the Amiga. But papercraft terrain, I mean, obviously, to give our Patreon a plug, we offer all kinds of different papercraft terrain that work fantastic. I've just released a load of shipping containers, and they provide a great backdrop and obstacles to race around. So you don't really need a lot to get started. But the main two items that you will need to either buy or make yourself, other than the cars, is you'll need a set of movement templates, which are different shapes that the cars will follow along to make the movements. And it's very similar to X-Wing, the miniatures game, if listeners are familiar with that. And you'll need skid dice, which are basically D6, six-sided dice that have got special symbols on that we'll talk about in a bit. And there's a few different game modes that you can play. There's ones where you can run zombies over. There's tag teams, capture the flag, and there's just a normal street race. I mean, you've played, Tom. What do you remember about your game?
I remembered the game involved a lot of laughter, and it was not a game that we were playing for any strategic element at all, really. It was just a proper beer and pretzel style experience. A lot of laughter, a lot of joy. It almost didn't matter to people whether they were going to win or lose. It was a spectacle. It was like watching an event unfold on the television and enjoying. It's ironic you said that about the theme, but it did feel like we were watching a television show and we were just mere observers rather than gamers watching this event unfold.
Yeah, I think that is a perfect description. I mean, I played last Wednesday with a couple of guys from the gaming club, and it was exactly that. I did not care whether I won or lost. Just being part of it was such fun. I was almost sabotaging myself to make funny things happen on the tabletop. So really, really fun and light experience, really. The rule books is thick, and I'm going to freak you out again like I did the other week. There's 192 pages in the rule book, but it's not 192 pages of rules. The rules can be condensed to an A4 quick reference sheet. One page is pretty much all you need to do to get through it. The rest of the rule book is theme, photos, and scenarios and extra rules for campaigns and things like that. The actual surface level is pretty simple.
And are you talking about Gaslands, or I know there was a second edition, Gaslands Refuelled, which was a revised edition, wasn't it, where they streamlined the rules even further, I think?
Yeah, I think that is a good point of clarity. I have never played Gaslands Original. I am just referring to Gaslands Refuelled. So that is the one published by Osprey Games. I don't think the original one was. It was a different, possibly a French publisher. But yeah, it's your typical Osprey Games output. It's beautifully presented and it's sensibly laid out. And it's actually the only official product you can buy for the game, the rulebook. And it's well worth doing that. I don't know, 15 to £20. It's a great item to have on your shelf.
It seems an odd thing for me that they didn't provide the dice or the measuring implements with the game.
I mean, they did in the sense that there are an appendix and you can photocopy them out the back, stick them to a piece of cardboard. If you think of it from a logistics point of view, it makes it a lot simpler to distribute this game. You're not relying on manufacturing process. You can just put the rules out there. But also it taps into that kind of DIY punk kind of ethos of the game, of making everything yourself or supporting other small businesses and making it. And that's something that I referred to earlier in the podcast. Something I've never seen, and I have massive respect myself as, a manufacturer of tabletop accessories. Normally you have to seek copyright licensing permissions, and for some games it's totally impenetrable, unless, like a lot of people on Etsy, you just ignore the rules and just steal the symbols. But what Mike Hutchinson has done is he's made a Friends of Gaslands program, which I will be joining this week in order to put out the products that I've designed for this game. And basically, he's got a Patreon. You fund his Patreon at the Friends of Gaslands level, and he basically gives you the license, and it's very, very reasonable. I just have huge respect for Mike, not only putting that kind of system out, but also his ethos. He's got a YouTube channel, Planet Smasher Games, and he's got to be one of the most creative individuals you'll ever see online. He's always coming up with different game ideas, challenges, discussing rule sets. He shares his design process. So if you haven't seen the Planet Smasher Games YouTube channel, it's amazing. I mean, I aspire to be like him from a design point of view. He's absolutely brilliant.
And the game itself, as you mentioned before, scenarios and campaigns in it, does it?
Yeah, there's a few different versions. If any of this sounds interesting, there's a YouTube channel called Cement Saul, and he actually does a solitaire playthrough, because like you say, it's like watching a TV show. So to play it solitaire, play all the cards yourself, is perfectly viable. So he runs through an entire campaign, which is like a TV series, basically, where they will visit different locations and have different types of race. As you hinted at, it's mainly a beer and pretzels game, and you're looking doing one-off races. So the main one you'll be doing is a street race or a death race, where basically you will take just one lap of a track, and that might be an oval, maybe a figure of eight if you're feeling particularly fruity. And you're just trying to get to the end of the track before everyone else, and that can either be by outracing them, but more usually making sure they don't exist by blowing them up.
So you talked a bit at the start, Kev, about the fact that you could customize cars, but certainly when I was playing it with my friends, there were a range of vehicle types there, but I'm not sure about the full range. We played with cars and there were motorbikes, and I think there was an ice cream truck. What kind of vehicles can you actually bring to the table?
Yeah, a huge range, basically. There's a point system, and they call it cans. Quite why it's cans, I don't know. I guess it must be cans of fuel or something. But typically a game is 50 cans. And to give you an idea, a standard car will be 12 cans. Or you could get an ambulance, which is 20, all the way up to 40 cans for the war rig, which is like the huge articulated lorry out of Mad Max Fury Road. So basically, if there is a toy of a vehicle, it will be in the rules somewhere. And it goes all the way from 5 cans up to 40 for something like a huge truck.
What I remember enjoying about the game, actually, and I think this is where the game sang to my gaming group when we were playing it, is the fact that obviously you've got these measuring implements that you can pick up. And I don't know if this was a house rule or a rule that we played during the game, but if you touch the implement, then you have to use it. Is that an official?
It's an official option. You touch it, you use it is a section in the rule book. Yeah, that's quite a hardcore way of playing. It's really difficult. It also requires you to be organized and lay all the templates out nicely so you can see them.
Yeah. And the other thing that I thought was the nice duality of the game was the fact that you had these templates and you picked it and you knew where you wanted to go and you'd articulate to the table, this is what I'm going to try to do. So everybody knew what you were trying to do. And then the humor came in from, was it skids or skidding dice?
The skid dice, yeah.
So obviously it's very funny, isn't it? If a friend of yours is saying, right, I'm just going to go there, I'm going to turn around and then I'm going to do this. And then it goes wrong. And I think that's why the game was such an enjoyable night.
Oh, it's genius. I mean, as you know, I love X-Wing, the miniatures game. So I really like that kind of spatial aspect of these types of games where you're putting the templates down, you're trying to predict where other things are on the tabletop, and you're making sure that you end up where you want to go. And obviously that is a challenge in itself. But what makes this really interesting is the idea of these skid dice, which almost adds like a push your luck type mechanic. So a brief overview of the turn structure. Basically, the game is divided into a series of gear phases. Gear 1 all the way up to gear 6. So in gear phase 1, everyone in first gear activates and moves. If they want to activate in the second gear phase, then they'll have to shift up into gear 2. Then everyone activates. If you didn't shift up for various reasons, then you get left behind in turn 3 and you don't get to activate. So there's basically motivation to keep moving, and going fast is good, as the rules say. So you want to be going up through the gears. And the way you actually go up through the gears is you roll the skid dice. And one of the results on the skid dice, on this D6, is the word shift. And that will allow you to change gear, but it also allows you to cancel out hazards. Because when you get to 6 hazards, you'll crash, you'll gain damage, and you may even blow up and have your car removed from the race. So the whole way through, you're trying to roll dice to gain the shifts you need to move up. But also on these skid dice are the hazards, which are going to cause you to flip over and wreck your car. But there's also spin and skid symbols. Now, these are really interesting because they allow you to do some clever driving by sliding your car, maybe turning it 90 degrees or angling it or flipping it backwards. But these give you hazards. So again, you're constantly fighting. Don't get to 6 hazards. Do I use the shift to push up and go faster so that I can activate and get further on in the race and maybe take a few hazards to do it? Or do I use the shifts to cancel the hazards that I've generated from doing all this crazy driving and survive to kind of fight another round? So you can play it how you want. You can be fast and dangerous, do all the crazy maneuvers, but probably blow up. Or you can try and hold yourself back a little bit, maybe even in order to get behind someone so that you can shoot one of the ridiculous number of weapons that you can equip to your car.
Yeah, certainly when I was playing it, we had some of the standard weapons. We all had the same, I think, on the top. There was 2 types of gun, one that would rotate so it could fire behind you, and one that was fixed and always facing in front of your car.
Yeah, as you can imagine, with a game where you've got a points cost for different vehicles, you can also spend points or cans on different upgrades. And the upgrades might be things like armor plating or nitro boosters. You can imagine what they do. But like you say, there's all kinds of different weapons. Things like standard handguns where you can shoot out the side of the car, all the way down to machine guns, magnetic jammers, smoke droppers, and even little RC cars with bombs taped to them that can fly out the back. You can send those into your enemies. So the way combat works is pretty simple, to be quite honest with you. Whether you ram into somebody or you decide to shoot a weapon, basically you're rolling D6, standard D6, and you're hoping for 4, 5, or 6 to hit. And typically the defender will just be looking for a 6 to defend. And if you get any hits through, that'll knock hull points off the car. If the hull gets to 0, then it blows up and it's out of the game. Now, there's an interesting thing about them blowing up. You can get audience votes, which kind of simulates the X Factor, Dancing with the Stars style audience participation. And even if you're out of the game, you can spend your audience votes for doing spectacular things like dying. And you can spend those audience votes to influence the race and handicap people and maybe back a winner of your own. So it feeds into that beer and pretzels thing. You don't care if you win. And even if you're knocked out, you're not just sat there watching, which would be fun in itself. You can still kind of throw influence over the game, which is great.
Yeah, that was interesting to me that there was player elimination in this game. Certainly, the game that I had obviously went down to the last 2 players of 5. And that did involve 3 players spending quite a lot of time just watching the game. They were having a lovely time doing so. You know, it's odd to play a game with player elimination these days.
Yeah, but I think with the rounds being so quick, it doesn't last long. If you're playing by the full rule sets, and that you may or may not have been using the audience votes, they can still kind of cast influence over the game. But also, I mean, if it was your first game, you're probably playing with quite a small range. Maybe you were playing 1 car each. But at 50 cans, you probably have 4 cars of your own.
Right, okay. It was 2 cars each that we did.
Yeah, which is fairly standard, to be fair. But I think at that point, you'd expect maybe to be boosting your cars with different weapons and upgrades and armor. So perhaps you'd last a little bit longer. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's fair that player elimination is entirely possible. But the fact it's so lightweight and funny, above all else, you're going to play this game, you're going to laugh. I don't think it's necessarily to its detriment.
No, I'd have to agree. I mean, it was a game that everybody since we played it have all talked about playing it again at some point soon.
Yeah, and I am absolutely looking forward to the next time I get to play.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up about there, and we're going to end with the usual messages. If you do enjoy our podcast, if you turn up every week, which I know a lot of you do, please do consider supporting us and the work that we do. It is a great pleasure to be doing this podcast with Kev, but it does come with some costs. And if we could just accrue a little bit of that back, then that would be excellent. There are lots of benefits on the Patreon that's worth checking out. There's Kev's solo miniature game Decline, and also some of his Foldscapes fantasy and sci-fi releases, which if you don't know what they are, please do have a quick look at that, because particularly if you're a miniature gamer or somebody who plays Gaslands, they will really add to the aesthetic of your table.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw one extra plug in those. I've just come in towards the end of the first release cycle of the kind of the modern and sci-fi section, which is a little terrain set I've called Container City. And you can imagine what that is. It's shipping containers, things from the junkyard, the scrapyard, ramps and ladders that you can access multi-level terrain. And it fits in perfectly for games like Kill Team and especially Gaslands. And the genius of these is you just print them out at home on your home printer, and they're designed in such a way that at the end of the game, they fold flat and you can fit an entire battlefield into an A4 envelope. So there's a super plug, which I don't normally do.
But if you don't want to do that, what you can do instead is you can join our Discord community and come and chat to us about games, and you'd be more than welcome there. And that would be brilliant to have you.
Yeah, so we hope you play some Gaslands. But until next time, thanks for listening.